There we go.
Welcome to the second part of our series that focuses on writing, creativity, and making a difference through the written word. We are quite excited to have with us today another special guest, Mon Trice, children's book author, advocate for justice. We're excited to have her here today for an important conversation on what are some of those strategies for the community to create our own literature and tell our own stories. So with that, my name is Dr. Artika Tyner. I'm the founder of Planting People Growing Justice Leadership Institute. And today's theme is about writing for change and writing for justice. And we want to thank our sponsors, the Metro Regional Arts Council, for providing the funds and resources to bring forth this program today. So I'm excited to kick off with an introduction to Mon Trice. Now we know Mon Trice, and you can see in back of her some of the wonderful books that she has written and published to help promote diversity in books, to share stories of triumph, of courage, and inspire young people to dare to dream big. So Mon Trice is a publisher, author of 3 children's books, a poet, and a co-founder of Focus GSD, a life skills consulting company, and so much more. So we're going to start with just a couple questions to explore this idea as we prepare for our youth writing competition. As you know, this youth writing competition is open to Minnesota residents of African American heritage, to our youth ages 8 to 13. And as we announced during our last session, it's for a theme on Kwanzaa. So with our topic being Kwanzaa for the youth writing competition, Mon, what does Kwanzaa mean to you, and what are some ways that we can celebrate Kwanzaa?
Wow. Well, when I think of Kwanzaa, I think of it's our own Thanksgiving. You know, Kwanzaa is a Swahili word, which means first fruits or first harvest. And it's a time that we come together to celebrate and to give thanks for all sorts of things. There are all sorts of different kind of ways that you can celebrate Kwanzaa. Reading of the African pledge and the principles of Blackness. You can reflect on the Pan-African colors, have discussions on each African principles of the day. That's typically the common way that I see Kwanzaa celebrated. Each day has its own principle. You talk about what that means and how you will live out that particular principle of the day. You can also learn and discuss African history, like a different part of it, and discover and explore that with you and your children. It's a good way to do it. And my favorite, and my son's favorite when he was little, is the candle lighting ritual with the Kanara. That's 7 different candles for each day or each principle of Kwanzaa. So each day a candle is lit. Also, you can do artistic performances such as singing, drumming, dancing, storytelling, reading, and of course feasting, which we all love. It leads up to that, the last day. So Kwanzaa starts on December 26th, and it takes us all the way to the new calendar year. One year, our family, we created shakerays, which is a musical African instrument, and we did it with dried gourd, yarn, and beads, and it was really wonderful. And there was a storyteller and the whole 9. So every year is a little bit different, but of course the candle lighting is and the principle learning is the biggest thing for us. But yeah, so I would encourage for each family to just explore it and to research it and find out what it means to you and how you want to celebrate it, and maybe even create some traditions in your own family of what you'll do every year.
Thank you. So you see, you can make it your own. You can make it your own experience to connect your family and to share some of those values. So Mon, what are, we have it listed here, and I actually have a dear friend who created this beautiful piece of artwork for me to list out the Kwanzaa values. Are there 1 or 2 that really you celebrate, not just during Kwanzaa, but year round, that stand out to you?
Nia, purpose, constantly seeking out purpose, fleshing it out, going deep and wide with the purpose, renewing that purpose every single day. That one stands out to me the most. And sometimes it shifts depending on whatever's going on in my life. But right now that's been it for the last several years.
So you heard it, Nia, purpose, living with intentionality. That's something that we all can start to incorporate. For me, this Kwanzaa, I started thinking about how do I honor Ujamaa, that idea of cooperative economics. Because as we think about that, and maybe it's the civil rights attorney in me or the researcher, oftentimes you hear that it would take over 2 centuries to bridge the race gap in America between Blacks and whites. Some studies say 228 years. So one of the things that I've really been focusing on, and I almost got myself in trouble, I was trying to justify eating boxes and boxes of Partake cookies because they were Black owned. But then I said, only a few cookies a day, slow down. But I give you this as an example because I think we can also be intentional on how do we make sure that Nia living with purpose again, and then the Imani, that piece about faith. How do we live with purpose and faith in some meaningful ways to build our communities? And one important piece is the cooperative economics, that piece of Ujamaa. So how do we incorporate that into our day-to-day experiences? So thank you for sharing the principles. Please, in the comments, share some of the principles around Kwanzaa that inspire you as an artist, inspire you as a writer, inspire you as a community member. We would love to hear from you. And all of this, I think the overarching theme is principle number 1, Umoja. We're doing all this to help spread and help connect through unity. So I think this is a perfect transition to asking the question then, if we know that our young people are going to write a book about Kwanzaa, how would you begin the process? What would be the first piece of advice to get them started for this youth competition?
Well, one, really define who you're writing to. Who are you writing for? Are you writing for the babies, the little bitty babies? Are you writing for our emerging readers? Or are we talking about a beginning chapter book? Or do you want to position the book as a nonfiction piece? Or do you want to bring forth like a really great adventure story that centers on Kwanzaa? So first, identify who are you writing to? Who's the story for? That's the first thing. And then second, your approach. But it all boils down to the basic principles of writing a book for children. And that is, you have to have a great story. We're talking about fiction books for children. It has to be a great story with a great character. Your audience, who has a really, really, really tiny attention span, they need to care about and love the character. And so you have to draw them in with the character and a great plot and a great story, and then spotlight whatever, in this case, spotlight Kwanzaa through their world, not your world. That's a huge difference there.
So let's unpack it a bit. Knowing my reader. So if we reach the early readers, we know those are the board books. What could be some potential concepts for Kwanzaa as it relates to those early readers?
So with board books, the key there is just to get them familiar with the book. If you notice, board books, they're made out of board. They're really, really thick because that particular audience, they experience literacy through their hands, through their mouths, through their eyes. They're really interactive with the actual material. So that's why you don't have pages for those books. They're extremely durable, to be stepped on, to be explored tactily. Okay, so those books tend to not have many words. Some of them don't have any words at all. Some of them are just are pictures that are very vibrant. Some of them are either very vibrant, or they have extreme contrasts, like black and white, because that's how babies, they see better with black and white when they're really tiny, and you want to draw them in toward the book. So you could have a different texture. I've seen board books that may have corduroy and then or velvet and then silk on different pages so that they can experience different textures. So at that point, we're getting them interested in books and not yet the actual reading piece, but you could introduce different items of Kwanzaa that way. Board books is really difficult to break into, mainly because they're concept books. Typically what happens is if there's an editor at a publishing house that decides, you know what, we need a board book on XYZ, they hire an illustrator and then they create it. It's usually not like an author-driven genre, the board books aren't typically, but it's not to say that you couldn't create one. Where we tend to find authors come in is at the picture book level. So again, as I stated before with the picture book, you want to make sure that your goal is clear. Like, am I going to present Kwanzaa as a concept and do a nonfiction book and really bring forth all of the principles of Kwanzaa, how it's celebrated, the history of it, and that sort of thing? Or do I want to shift and go the fiction route? So if you decide that you want to write a children's fiction picture book in regards to Kwanzaa, it's important to realize that Kwanzaa is not your story. So I gave some writing prompts at our first workshop last week, and that was to really develop your characters. I gave you two and to make them opposite. So by developing character, you know everything about your character, where they were born, where they live, what their room looks like. Do they like school? Do they hate school? If so, why? Like, you create this entire world around your character in the world that they live in. And you do this, not that you're going to write to all of those elements, but it helps you to clearly write a story that makes sense for your character's essence and the world in which they live in. Because the story that you tell needs to come from the character's perspective and not the author's perspective, if that makes sense. So I'll give you some examples. Think about Charlie Brown's Christmas. You don't have an author telling a story about Christmas. You have a character, Charlie Brown, who's just, he's depressed because Christmas has become so commercialized. And then you start to get introduced into all the characters in that story. And one, I think it was Lucy, that encourages him to direct a Christmas play. So suddenly we have a story about the Christmas play. Like, that's your story and the plot thickens, but there's a message wrapped up in it. So if you're thinking of writing a Kwanzaa fictional story, you really have to think about your character and their world. How would this person react to Kwanzaa? And you still have to have a conflict and something really exciting happening around Kwanzaa in their world. And there's all different kinds of scenarios that you could set up. You could even create an opposing character. When I think of opposing character, I think of like the Grinch. He wasn't for Christmas in the beginning, right? So we get on that, how can anybody hate Christmas, right? But you take the opposite and then you go to the edge with it, and then you bring him full circle to where, oh my gosh, he's suddenly loving Christmas. So Christmas is at the center of the story, but it's not the story. So that's how you write really good fiction for children, is to still give them that adventure and that entertainment so that they fall in love with reading. And then you educate them as a consequence of your character's world. I feel like I just went on a tangent there.
No, it's helpful.
That point across.
No. We really appreciate the examples to think it through. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, since you have two of your books behind you. So let's put Cannon's Crash Course to the test. If Cannon is then being placed into the scenario about Kwanzaa, can you introduce the character and give us, just spark an idea of what it would look like to put Cannon as a character?
Absolutely. Just when you said that. So here's the thing. I did lots of character development with Cannon. Now, my son's name was Cannon, but I made sure that Cannon, my character, wasn't anything like my son. Some elements for sure. But here you have a young boy. He's super determined. He's going to ask for direction, but if he doesn't get it and he doesn't get it fast, he's going to take matters into his own hands. So I imagine that maybe Cannon's family is celebrating Kwanzaa, and he's responsible for the candle lighting and ceremony, and they're not moving fast enough. So maybe he starts to light a candle unsupervised, and there's this big issue. Stuff happens, and there you have a conflict there, because you're not supposed to use the candles or whatever unsupervised, and maybe this was introduced early in the book, and then he does it, and maybe there's melted wax that destroys something that's very personal and dear to another character in the story. This is just me thinking through the plot, but it's like he does something in an effort to try to help, and it actually ruins it. So then he tries to fix it again, and it makes it worse. And suddenly you're like, oh no, Cannon, like what have you done? Like, the intention is great, but the impact is disastrous. That's the angle that I would take Cannon through.
So you've seen it live, unfolding, the process of the characters coming alive. The characters, then you see this piece of the protagonist having a challenge in this particular scenario that Mon just provided. But what do you do with it? So part of what I want to really inspire our young people related to is to unleash your creativity. Mon was able to do this on the spot for us. And for many young people, what I love when I'm going to the classroom for author visits and to teach in the classroom is an opportunity to say, let your imagination unfold.
Yes, and don't be afraid of dumb ideas. I've had some really dumb ideas that once I thought them through were great ideas. So allow yourself, give yourself permission to produce some really bad ideas, to produce some stupid stories, because the process is where the gold is. Go through the process. Don't edit and don't judge it. Do not criticize yourself. Do not judge yourself. Just go. Like I think of Seuss's book, Go Dog Go, Go Author Go. Right, don't think about grammar at this stage. You do need to think about grammar, but in the beginning of trying to visualize what your plot is going to be, don't judge it, don't correct any spelling, don't do anything. Just allow yourself to be free to think and to push your ideas. And I ask why 5 times. Like why? And it doesn't have to be a practical answer. Remember, you're writing for children. So their imaginations are big. Your imagination needs to be big too. Like, so why is Cannon fascinated with these candles? So now you have to reach back into his background, which hopefully you had already fleshed out before attacking this project, to see, well, why would he be fascinated in candles? Is it the candle, or is it the leadership that he's responsible for something? Is there a rivalry between him and a particular brother in the house? You know, does he have something to prove, or is he trying to impress someone? So I always go to the why. If I can answer the why and then I get an answer, then I ask why about that too. So I keep pushing toward the edge until I have a really dynamic story to run with. If you do all of that, then by the time you trim the fat and trim it all down, because it's going to be trimmed. If you're editing, you're going to have tons of revisions. It's going to make sense and it's going to flow naturally because you did all the legwork up front.
I love that. And one of the things for our young and emerging writers, I encourage you to think about, you hear that notion oftentimes that teamwork makes the dream work. Maybe bring a friend to ask you those whys and to be a part of the process as well. So as you're developing the character, your friend can ask you why. Because in the classroom, that's one of the things that I do to help students learn about their leadership style. I have the partner that they're working with then become the detective. And the detective asks, why do you believe this? How did you come to this understanding? So don't be afraid to work with a team of friends. This could be a small group exercise where you all are working on the book together, because I know for me, writing groups have been a powerful piece of my own development of my characters, and to also produce books that are meaningful and have more depth to them. Because then my writing circle is asking why, how, what does this mean? So please, 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 this may be an opportunity. Grab a partner, grab a friend, and start working on your book project.
Don't be afraid to dissect different pieces as well. Kwanzaa is a 7-day celebration. Maybe you want to focus in on just that one principle and write a story around that, what happened that particular day, instead of taking your character through all 7 days. Play around with it, play around with the different points of views. You can even do, I like to play with this to finally get a really good story, different points of view. You asked me about Cannon specifically. It could be Cannon's point of view or his older brother's point of view. It could be the candle's point of view. Now that's a really creative one. If you want to introduce a whole world of wax in the candles who are excited to be a part of Kwanzaa, and you can even have something going on with the different colors of the candle and kind of introduce a very sub theme of racism very subtly. But remember, the story is always the plot and how well you've developed those characters. So even if it isn't the kids, you can use different angles of Kwanzaa. I was thinking specifically of, trying to think of the name of the book, Humphrey the Hamster. He was a classroom hamster, and those stories are told from the hamster's point of view. And it's hilarious because it's how he sees the classroom, and it's not being told from the child's point of view. So those are more tricky to write, but I think it's a beautiful exercise for anyone who's trying to write for children to do. So remember, regardless of whose point of view you're writing from, you have to write from their mind and their heart and their background, and not your author mind and background. Just make sure you're not writing too old, which tends to be a very common mistake that we make when we're writing for children. So you don't want to write down to them. You want to write up to them, to their world.
Oh, you got me thinking. I might do a writing prompt after our workshop on the
I've
camp.
got some. I think you asked me to have some writing prompts today. You asked me to have a writing prompt, and I actually have 3.
Love it. Love it, because I was thinking about the candles and their colors. Sometimes we
Yeah.
overlook that the candles are black, red, and green. It's why,
Mhm.
even with our back to our roots design, it's why I'm wearing the
But you can go into the candles world and give a whole new meaning behind those colors, how they came to be that color, what it means for them. You can create an entire society of a red candle society, and how these particular candles were chosen to be a part of quad. I mean, you can do whatever. This is part of why I like writing, because I create what I want. It's my world, it's my rules within the world, within the, within the industry, but I can stretch the imagination and do whatever I want. I think a Toy Story, how that was brilliantly written. I think pretty much everybody's seen Toy Story. So it's from the perspective of the toys and not the kids, and being his favorite and not ending up in a box in an attic somewhere. That's the main concern of the toys. So it's like, what would be the main concern of Kwanzaa candles? What would be the main concern of a Kanara? These aren't my writing prompts. This is just stuff I'm coming up off the top of my head, just having the discussion with you and our Facebook friends. But there's all sorts of ways. It takes courage to ask the unconventional questions. So when you think Kwanzaa, open up your mind to expand. Okay, yes, it's a holiday for us, but what does that mean? There's 7 whole days that you can have fun with. There's also, you can have fun with the libation part, or the principles part, or the colors, or the kanara, or any of it. You can take it and zero in on it and create a whole world around it, and then tell the story.
And I also, one important piece, culture through food. Could you talk about how maybe some
Yes.
families have a little red with plantain, where another family has sweet potato pie as a dessert? How do we bring in that culture across the diaspora that influences what even the meals are? So I must be hungry. I'm thinking about all the different things that we have.
Yeah, that's a great idea too. To
Yeah,
take
food.
color and do. Now I'm hungry.
See, it happens every time. But
So,
this is
yes.
modeling the examples of that
Mhm.
writing group, that writing circle, and coming together to share information. And look at how we just co-created a whole new storyline just around food. So all the different components, even what you wear, Mon. Oh, think about it.
Sure.
The
Sure.
beautiful attire that we wear to celebrate as well. So there's just so much there. There's a couple follow-up questions that I have for you. I just want to make sure that also that our young people have a sense of how would you approach this, just to reiterate so they can clearly see the distinctions between fiction and nonfiction.
Correct. How would I approach it?
Mhm.
I'm sorry, maybe I didn't understand your
Yes,
question.
how would you approach this project and this competition of a fiction piece versus nonfiction? Because I just want to make sure that everyone knows the delineation.
So decide, I mean, as far as the fiction or nonfiction, decide which route you want to take. If it's nonfiction, then you tend to go into the holiday itself. Like, what is Kwanzaa? Where did it come from? What are the elements of it? So that's more of a concept nonfiction book, because Kwanzaa is nonfiction. If you wanted to go the fiction route, we already just discussed that we're still talking character development, story world building, and your story needs to have a very clear beginning, middle, and end. So that's key. And to make sure that you're not adulting the book. That happens so quickly and so easy. I can't say it enough. Do not adult the book. Make sure whoever is telling the story in your story, that you are viewing the plot through their eyes and through their world. So just making a decision on whether or not you want to tackle a nonfiction, or if you want to go the fiction route. The fiction route gives you way more creative license than the nonfiction. Not that you can't be creative with nonfiction, but we're telling the truth about Kwanzaa. So there are some things that can't be disputed that you will need to address, and you will need to discuss in depth on your reader's level. So again, you have to be cognizant of who you're writing to, because how you would write to a first grader is not the same as you would write to a fourth grader, not the same as you write to a seventh grader. So understand the sentence structure that you need, your vocabulary, and that you're not dumbing it down. So what I mean by that is, if I'm writing to third graders, it's okay to have 4 or 5 words that are difficult for them, so that they can use their literacy toolkit. They can use context clues to sound it out and figure out what that word is. So not only are you entertaining, you're also building vocabulary. And if you want to really satisfy the teachers, if you did that intentionally, to have a little glossary at the end of your book, that's always an option. The teachers are going to spot it anyway, but if you wanted to make it crystal clear, that's something else that you could do. But for the competition, I'm just like, get out a notebook. Whatever idea that you have, it's viable. Okay, so again, there's no such thing as a dumb idea. Everything is useful and a stepping stone. You just may need to flesh it out or revise it or flip it on its head or whatever, but just keep going until something just really resonates at you and says, write me. So when you get to that space, then you know you've got a really good story idea.
So there you go. An open invitation for you to be able to create, an open invitation for you to be able to build the characters, an open invitation. So a piece of my work, I have probably half books that are fiction and another half that are nonfiction. So I just want to, and that's why I asked that follow-up question. For me, I think my natural lane is to work on nonfiction, because as a researcher, as a lawyer, that just comes naturally to me. So I would probably write a nonfiction piece on the history of Kwanzaa, on the history. And for me, someone who has a passion of connecting the diaspora, I mean, we're 1 billion strong on the continent and 400 million across the diaspora, I would probably focus on it through the lens of Pan-Africanism. Maybe even introducing Marcus Garvey. Why does the Black candle matter? Why does the Black star matter? So I want you to build upon that invitation based upon what you're interested in. Because that's the other piece, is being an author is fun. I get to build upon.
It should be fun. It should be fun.
Yeah.
You pull your hair out.
You can, but it can be fun.
Yeah, it's always a growth, for me, it's always been a growth project. Like I always find something that I can build upon or expand, or I learn something new that I didn't learn before. But there has to be, for people like me, type A people who have control issues, there has to be a release of that, because there's certain parts of that you're not going to be able to control. You have to kind of let yourself flow in what comes up and see if it works for what you're doing. So you have to give yourself that permission to fail and not be great in the process. It's okay. It's an area where you get lots of feedback when you do that. So it's amazing how you may even start out with one idea and end up with something completely different. That's also very common in the process. So don't be surprised if that happens. You start out with, okay, I want to write about this. And you get into the weeds of the story and the plot. And because you've already done your homework and you've done really great character development, you realize my character would never respond this way, or he wouldn't act this way. He would do this instead. And so now you've got to switch your story a little bit. So always be true to your character, even if you have to change the plot a little bit, because you don't want your readers to go, that doesn't make sense for so-and-so, Oh, here's an analogy. I think we've all probably have come across someone on Facebook presenting themselves to be a friend and they weren't actually the person that you were connected to. I just recently had someone in my inbox pretending to be my aunt. Well, first of all, it was 10 o'clock at night and I know she goes to bed early. See, that's a part of knowing your character. She would never use Messenger. That's the other thing. So my flags were already up. Like, this is not the person I know. So you need to treat your characters the same way. It's like, does this make sense for her? Doesn't make sense for my aunt to use Messenger. She hates it. It doesn't make sense for her to be up at 10 o'clock at night because she's nodding by 8:30. And then she starts asking me questions about things that she should already know. And I knew right away, this person is not who they claim to be. You don't want your readers to get into a situation where, well, this character on page 5 is not who they claim to be on page 1. So you want to be true to that so that their actions, their dialogue, that it makes sense for them and it makes sense for the situation that they're in. Can you imagine Charlie Brown being asked to kick a football and then he decides, no, I'm not going to do it? It's like, no, he always does it. Like, that's who he is. He always tries to kick the football and Lucy always pulls it away because that's who they are. That's who they were created to be. If he suddenly did something different, it's like, whoa, what's happening? So you don't want to have that type of inconsistency with what you've already built.
So that's a perfect reminder that we're going to have to get deep. Remember, do not forget, I'm going to reiterate, Mon has told us those 5 whys. So when we get to the different layers, just like the characters, it's like us, that there's different levels of complexity to our personalities on how we engage. So don't forget to keep developing those characters, keep asking the whys, keep asking the how, keep getting into the feelings and the experience. If you choose to do that fiction book, we want to feel the story, and the story should come alive. So give us a sense then, brand new, I'm a young person, my imagination, I have all these ideas. What type of routine do you use as a writer? How do I just grab my pen? What should I do?
So as you start to get into the discipline of writing every day, like you write every day, it doesn't matter what it is, write something, you'll find that there are certain activities that you like more than others. For me, I like to people watch. And then I imagine what that person is like. And then I start writing around that based on what I see. I found actually recently in one of my journals, I was sitting in Lola's, that was a restaurant here in St. Louis, downtown St. Louis, for brunch. It's no longer open, but I was sitting there waiting for a friend of mine. So I pulled out my journal. I was bored. I thought this is a perfect time to sit and write. So I started writing about the ambiance of the place and looking around. And when the waitress came over, I wrote about her and like what I thought her life was like. And then the outside, you want to exercise that muscle, the creativity muscle, to be able to take in information and manipulate it, or take it in as it is and be creative with how you describe it. And then always write down your thoughts. Get used to finding inspiration everywhere you look. Like it's all in how you think about what you're receiving in. So getting used to stretching the boundaries of your reality for fiction writers. So I do remember there was a woman that walked into the restaurant and I thought, wow, she was hurried when she got here because she had on clogs with her bare feet. And she also had on a coat, but then she had on like a spaghetti top. So it's like all the seasons were all over. Like, it's like, pick one, what are we doing here? So I created a story as to why she would show up there like that. There was nothing wrong with how she looked, but I just noticed that's summer, that's fall, that's winter, what's going on? So it went into this whole thing about, around her roommate, and they had just come back from the hospital, and, just let your imagination run wild. But it was really interesting to me to read that because a lot of it I didn't remember. And I found myself going, okay, then what happened? Like, where were you going with this? So when you get used to doing that, then when you are in the structured part of writing, actually creating a story, you've developed your character, you've created your story world. Now you put together a plot. It's easier to drive that map because, oh, this is familiar. I need to introduce this. I need for it to make sense. And I need for there to be a clash somewhere to draw in the reader's attention. So just continue to write all sorts of things.
So there you have it. Continue to write, whether it's on a Post-it note, whether it's in your journal,
anything,
every and anywhere. I can think about all my books, so that's why I was kind of smiling as you were giving your remarks. All of my books started with a Post-it note and initial writings on a napkin, and then I brought them together over time. I mean, in fact, if I'm thinking about one of my first opportunities to create a clinic model, I wrote the vision on napkins on a flight. You get that sense of the prophet Habakkuk says, write the vision and make it plain. That way he who sees it, and that's all of us, I'll make it inclusive, can run with it. So I give you the sense then of a reminder that a journal is important. And if you're not the type to journal or write down notes, your phone is a powerful tool. So when I'm exercising, and we're the land of 10,000 lakes in Minnesota, people oftentimes see me around the lake talking into my phone. And then I can get it transcribed. And then I have the notes on what am I thinking about. So I'll give you a tip on the other side, on the nonfiction writer. I'm constantly looking at news, updates, and reports. And I'm doing the same thing that Mon has introduced to you. I'm asking why. For instance, if we look at the criminal justice system, I'm asking, why did we get here related to mass incarceration? And then I'll ask the next question, who is impacted? And then I'll start asking how, and then I'll start to go back because I believe in your rule of 5. I'll go back then and say, why is it that there's a role of police? Why is there a role of law enforcement and and the prosecutor's office, how are they a part of this? So then I go back and forth and ask those questions until I get clarity, just like the characters coming alive, clarity of what is happening in current events, what's the history of it, what's the present day reality. I go through the same process that Mon has just introduced to you. The only difference is I'm going through it through historical records. And I'm going through it. So I don't watch the news like other people. I'm just watching the news with my mother, and she's just like, can you be quiet and just watch the news? I think that's how she felt this morning. But no, I was going in depth. I said, well, if that is, what is it? How did it get started? What issue is it seeking to address? Because I wanted to get a sense of the backdrop of a new book project that I'm working on. So it's the same process for both. So I just want to reiterate, don't feel left out. If you don't have that, if you feel like your imagination doesn't lead you to a fiction book, there's plenty of work to do related to nonfiction, because if you just do a quick Google search, you will see that there's a dearth of resources on Kwanzaa for youth, specifically targeted for youth in books. So let's be specific. So this could be your moment to reshape history also as a nonfiction author.
So true, so true.
So the possibilities are
on those writing practices. I think online you could find a whole list of writing prompts. There are even books about, like, I've come across a book where use your writing prompt every single day. If you want to, like, answer the questions of those prompts, create your own prompts, have your friends give you prompts, write about your environment. There's all sorts of things to write about. It's again asking those questions, being really inquisitive, and then giving something that's non-traditional as your answer. That having the non-traditional answer is always the way for me to come up on a great pod. So I don't know if you wanted to get into the writing prompts or not. That
would be perfect. So we will tune in. But before you go into the writing prompts, I know that there are educators here with us today. How would you use some of these tools in the classroom? Any quick tips that you would want teachers to know about how to help students unleash their imagination and do this powerful writing and journaling and engagement that you're talking about?
Yes. So first of all, realize that Kwanzaa is for every student, not just African-American students. So don't turn to your one African-American student and ask them all the questions, okay? Because an individual student does not speak for an entire culture or an entire race. They can share their personal experiences, but I want to make sure that teachers are being inclusive with this particular topic, because I see that quite a bit. They think, oh, this will be great for my African-American students. It's like, no, it's good for your other students who don't practice the holiday as well. Just like someone who learns about Hanukkah, who doesn't practice Hanukkah, it's good to know. It's good knowledge, it's good practice. So that's the first thing. As a teacher, incorporating Kwanzaa in your classroom, I would first make sure you're engaging all of the senses. Like you can remember the lyrics to a song that you haven't heard in 10 years because you're engaging your auditory memory, or even how you felt when you heard the song or where you were. We all remember that. So perhaps bringing in a dish, which I think times have changed now and people don't bring in like homemade dishes, but bringing in something that's really close to the culture, or having them create different things, musical instruments such as the gourds, or having them write, having your students do writing prompts, or reading a poem, or creating different types of poem. You can actually embed Kwanzaa in every subject that you're teaching. If we're talking about history, talk about the history of Kwanzaa. If we're talking about math, how many candles are there in the Kinara when we're talking about Kwanzaa? How many principles are there? With social studies, the culture, African culture, you can introduce it every single day. You can talk about the principles and purpose and economic empowerment in every way. So to the teachers, you need to be just as creative as the authors here and ask yourself, like, why? If I was a kid, you know what really excites your kids during the school year. So introduce it through that vein so that they're excited about it. Have them participate in it themselves. Even start like a little garden, a little container garden in the classroom. And then plan it so that when you do the harvest, you can start talking about Kwanzaa and what that means, the first fruits of the harvest. There's all sorts of things that you could do with Kwanzaa, but those are just some to name a few.
I love it. So you heard it here. Mon has given us some practical pieces and a reminder for culturally responsive teaching. It's not just a Heritage Day. It's not just an event. It's not just an episode. It's something that we incorporate throughout the entire year, throughout the entire learning process. And it got better. Mon gave us some examples across all of the topics that you cover, from social studies to science to math. So you've heard it here. This is our opportunity for our educators and our parents who are tuning in and supporting the work to think about how do you engage reading, learning, and creativity in some unique ways. So here it is, the moment we've all been waiting for, because I got calls after your first workshop. I love those writing prompts. So to unleash that creativity, recharge it for us.
Okay. So I have 3 that I wrote down, so don't be surprised if I come up with another as I'm talking about these, but I'll give you 3 for sure. So number 1, imagine the characters that I told you to develop, that they love Kwanzaa and they're responsible for the Kwanzaa celebration at school the following day. They wake up the next day, the day of their celebration, to find out that the president has passed a law making Kwanzaa illegal. Your character loves Kwanzaa. What is your character going to do? So this is, again, where strong character development comes into play. How is your character going to respond to this? You got to spring them into action, but do they have a more subtle response to this? Are they going to be really assertive, or are they going to be aggressive? Like, how are they going to respond? So then you write the book from there. And again, remember, the response it has to make sense for your character. It doesn't have to be practical. Okay, so what would your character do? If your character is a 5-year-old, what are they going to do? What's going to make sense for them? We're not saying that you have to resolve the problem, just how is your character going to attack the problem, and how are they going to be different at the end of the book? So that's 1. So remember, you have to take into context who your audience is. What age are we talking about here? So, a 5-year-old is going to respond one way, a middle school kid is going to respond a different way, but they are all going to have the challenges in their responses, so you can play with that as you develop your story. So that's writing prompt number 1. Writing prompt 2 is that your character is preparing for Kwanzaa celebration at home, and they wake up to find out the color red is missing. Like, everywhere they go, there's nothing red anymore. It's blank, it's transparent. It's like, well, what happened to the color red? And you could really do some things with that. You can go into like what red means in Kwanzaa. You can kind of set it up in the beginning if you want to, and have red be that character's favorite color in the whole the Kwanzaa celebration. Maybe they really like red for some reason, and they wake up and it's gone. You have the opportunity to introduce all of the colors, and maybe if you're going to take it from the point of view, like I said before, of the candles, it's like, well, where did the red candles go? Where did the red candles go? Or where did the color red go? So that's another prompt. Like, suddenly it's missing. Like, that's not even a realistic thing that happens in our world, but this is your world. This is a world that we're creating because it's fiction, so you can make it what you want. Just make sure that the responses in this fictional world make sense to the character and the plot. Let's see. The other one is the Kanara is missing. Like, you're all set up for the celebration, and the Kanara is gone. Like, what happened to it? Did somebody take it? Did somebody think that it was that the whole display was suddenly going to be taken down? You can ask why there, and fill in all sorts of blanks. You can look through your entire cast and think, did this person have it? Why would they have it? So again, we're back to the whys. Does this character have anything to do with it? If so, why? What did they do? Was it intentional or was it not intentional? Like, why would they do that? Why would the Kanara be missing? And then when you answer that, ask another why. Well, why did this person do it? Well, why did they do that? Do they not like the main character? Or did they call themselves helping and they actually ended up hurting? So you can approach it that way. So there's 3 writing prompts there, and you can just keep going with some of your own.
So you can see it. There are a myriad of different ways to engage with this writing process. And I don't know about you, so I was writing them down. So I have 3 to work through today just to make sure that I have some excitement and keep that writing routine. So I just want to reiterate that. Sometimes we think we don't have time, the hectic nature, life is busy for us all. But even taking those just 5 minutes, just take 5 minutes, just start off with 5 minutes, going through a writing prompt, thinking about what you see, what you hear, what you experience. So the beauty of writing as well, all 5 senses are activated.
Mhm.
You have all those experiences coming in at once. So let's, would you be willing to go through one of the writing prompts, one of your favorites, just to take a few minutes and kind of work us through it?
One of my favorite writing
Yeah,
prompts?
the one that you just, out of the 3 that you introduced, do you have a favorite of the 3 that you want to work through just for a second?
I actually don't have a favorite. I just kind of, hmm. I have to think about these a little bit.
Okay.
I don't. I don't really have one because what happens is I'd have to think about it and start writing down like answers to all these questions that I have for each one of them. I think I told you in the beginning uh, with our project with Room to Read, the story that I ended up writing was not the story that I intended to write with the scoop on inventors. I thought it was going to be something completely different. So let's see. With the Kanara missing, what happened to it? I don't know. I'd have to, because I haven't done the work as far as the characters are concerned. I don't like, I would have to suddenly really build a character really quickly in my mind. So I wouldn't do it really great justice, but I'm thinking, I don't know.
Can we bring Cannon in again?
Oh, what would Canon do?
What would Cannon do? And we want to make sure while Mon is going through this exercise and giving us some ideas, we want to make sure that you also reach out and support. Changing Seasons, Cannon's Crash Course, you have an opportunity to add 2 new books and also Scoop of Inventors you can download from montrice.com free of charge. So here's some opportunities for you to expand your horizons, broaden them, teachers, parents, to expand your home libraries, your school libraries. You have a unique experience here with starting with a few of Mon's books. So if it's Canon, the Kanara's missing.
Canon is a fixer. So Canon is going to first probably try to look forward. If not, he's going to try to replace it. And he'll probably replace it with something that he probably shouldn't replace it with. So I'm trying to think, what could he use to hold up the candles in? Probably something belonging to a parent that the parent prizes and by poking candles in it, destroys it in some kind of way. But I can't think of what that thing would be at the moment. But that would be his approach. I don't think he would even go about asking because he's not like he may ask once, but I think he would go about looking for it. Like he may search in his brother's room and in his parents' room, and then he just decides, okay, well, I need a Kanara, so I'm just gonna make one. And then maybe he makes it out of something that doesn't quite hold up the candles. So then that's a bust. Or I'm trying to think, what is something that moms have if they don't want their kids touching? Something that he's not supposed to have. Or
good china, we know that. Good.
Okay, so maybe she has these little antique miniature cups of china and he decides to use that instead for the candle holders and he chips them by doing that. And now mom's really upset. It's something to where Cannon's good intentions always leads him into trouble and then later into victory. So that's typical for that particular character. Tanisha in Changing Seasons, she just can't make up her mind about things. It just depends. She just goes with the flow and is totally in the moment. So for her, it could be the canary is missing. Let's do something else. Like let's just change the celebration altogether and scrap the candles, or she'll come up with something that has nothing even to do with Kwanzaa. And so everybody that she invites is like, well, what happened to the candles? So it can be a conflict for her that way, that the celebration ended up being not what she advertised it to be. And then maybe there'd be a conflict with the relationship in the book that way. I don't know. I'm just kind of, this is how you flesh out ideas, by proposing different scenarios and then checking to see how viable they are, by asking, well, why would she do that? And how would this other person react? And does that make for a good story? No, but you don't ever erase, right? You just move on, because even though that particular thing didn't make sense at that time, it could be through your other discoveries of producing other scenarios that you may circle back to the first one with new information that now makes that a really good idea. So don't scrap anything. Everything's good until you have a finished product. Like, I don't throw away anything. I still have all my revisions from the last project we did. Now I could probably bundle those up and archive them. But at the time, it's like, there's no way I'm throwing any of this away, because who knows what we may have to dig back for and pull back into the story. So again, nothing's a bad idea. Everything is material to work with, kind of like putting together a really nice dress. You don't know if you're going to need that strip of lace or not. Right now it's garbage. In a couple of hours it could be your saving grace. So hold on to everything. Nothing's a bad idea. Just play around with it. There's nothing it's not wrong unless it doesn't make sense. So step back from your project and ask, does this make sense? Would this make sense to my reader? Does it flow for who I currently know the character to be? Do I actually have a plot? Do I have a story? Is there a clear middle? Is there a clear ending? Is there a clear beginning? If not, then those are the things you need to work on, right? Am I dumbing down my reader? Don't do that. Remember, we're always writing up to children. Are there any holes in the story? Do I have questions? If I am not the author and I'm reading your manuscript for the first time, would I have questions? So those are areas of development that you can find there too. But above all, have fun with it. It's not laborious, or it shouldn't be laborious. It's just a lot of, you'll appreciate this word as an attorney, it's a lot of discovery. Lots and lots of discovery. You discover things about your character, but more importantly, you discover things about yourself. So have fun. I hope you all participate in the contest. I think this is amazing, Artika. I appreciate you for including me in on this, and I can't wait to see the products that come from it.
Thank you. I think for me, I get excited. So this is round 2. You can go back and watch round 1 of the first workshop on our YouTube channel, or also on Facebook Live. So I think this is really, for me, even as a children's book author, as someone who loves reading, this is just an important reminder of the ability to create. And you saw it live on the writing prompt. Mon going through based upon, and this is why you have to know your characters, character stories in different contexts and different places. So I was mentally going through the process as well for our character Justice. And I was thinking, what would Justice do? And one of the things that Justice loves is being in relationship with others. So I could see Justice activating the community and bringing people together to say, what can we create? What can we build? And it would lead to maybe what Mon talked about earlier. What if it led to a community celebration? What if it led to a community play? What if it led to a community-led song? What are some of all those different pieces? So I'm encouraging you, as you're writing these fiction pieces, you want to be able to hear your character. You want to be able to understand them, and you want to know their nature. So I'm just grateful for you to, jump right in and take that writing prompt and apply it to your own character. So I could see Justice doing that. And then for the project that we worked on together, Stand Up and Be Counted, I named the character, the main character, Nia, because her purpose was around community engagement. So I can see Nia, even before we get to the Kanara, what is she doing? She's educating people about Kwanzaa. Maybe for the first 2 days of Kwanzaa, she's wearing green, and people are saying, why are you wearing all green from head to toe? Nia, tell us. And Nia's talking about the richness of the land, about the power of the harvest and the celebration and honor. And maybe Nia likes to sing in my book too. So maybe Nia's even singing, one of those gospel hymns of that sense that we've come this far by faith. So you're seeing how I know the characters. You saw how Mon modeled how we know the characters in the experience. So we want you to have the same license and invitation to create and make things come alive in some magical ways. So as we close, we want to make sure that we get a full introduction. Can you introduce us to your books, how we can remain connected, and how we can support the work?
So my website is montrice.net. You can connect to me through there. All of my social media is also on there. You can send me direct messages there. You can purchase the books there. Also, anytime I'm doing a workshop, that's listed also on the website. So currently I have 3 books behind me. Let's see, which way am I to go? Cannon's Crash Course. It's a story about a little boy who uh, his brothers are outside riding their bikes and they're having a wonderful time. And he has a brand new bike, but he doesn't know how to ride it. And nobody has time to teach him. So he decides he's going to teach himself. And so he gets into one disaster after another, and then he decides he's going to quit. And he gets some really unlikely encouragement from a strange place that helps him to actually get to the point where he is riding his bike successfully. And then we have Tanisha, Changing Seasons. So it's the first day of school, and the teacher is asking the class for their favorite season and why. And the reader gets a front row seat inside of Tanisha's thoughts as she goes through each season. Now, what I did with each season is I sprinkled it with a little of African American culture inside each and every season. She goes through and she's thinking of all the things that she likes about the season. She starts thinking about the next and she changes her mind. And so in each season, you're meeting also extended family members. As African Americans, we tend to have close extended kinship ties, like our uncles and our aunts are almost like second parents in a lot of ways. And our first cousins are typically like siblings. That's how close our kinships tend to be, not always, but tend to be. So you meet mom and dad and nana and grandpa and things that they're doing with her throughout the seasons. You also meet her best friend. Her best friend is Chi, who's Vietnamese, and they go to the corner store for their favorite snack, which is pickles and peppermint stick. So you get all these different things, but it is a concept book with a story in it. That makes sense. So we are learning about the seasons, but what the season means for me, how I experience it as an African American child. So for Thanksgiving, we're talking sweet potato pies, right? We're not talking pumpkin pies for the most part. I remember summertime catching lightning bugs. We didn't call them fireflies, they were lightning bugs. We would catch them in the jar for the light. So there's all sorts of things. And in the spring, you meet her grandpa and they're doing that thing. And at the end, you hear what she says is her favorite season, but then it begs the question, is this really her favorite season? Because she gave us reasons as to why she loved them all. But you also get elements of each season and how each season is different. So the book serves multiple purposes for introducing the season, also introducing the culture, and introducing different family members and pointing out how our kinship ties are different across the culture. So that's Changing Seasons. And then lastly was The Scoop on Inventors. Little boy comes home, he's upset, they're learning about inventors in class, but none of them were African American. And he's like, Dad, like, I mean, we learned this stuff at home. It's like we didn't do anything if the school had any say in it. And so Dad says, come help me plan your mom's birthday party, which is today. So they're preparing for the party. And as they do, Dad starts to point out all the things that they're using in preparation for the party that was created by African American inventors. So there's a story, but then there's also a showcase of inventors through the story, through Dre's eyes, in how the dad is the primary teacher of our history. And that's actually how it is now. Our African American history isn't in academia. It's not in the history books. If so, you get like a paragraph. I think it was when I was growing up. And in some places, it's not going to be taught because they're making not illegal, but it's against the school rules to teach African American history, as if, make no mistake, Black history is American history. It just is, and we're more than civil rights and slavery. But that's a whole nother discussion. Anyway, that book is free. It's also on the Room to Read platform, Literacy Cloud. But that is how you stay in contact with me. Those are my products. Whenever I'm doing a teaching session or a workshop or a master class, you can get that on my website as well. Again, it's montrice.net. That's MONTRICE.net.
So you heard it here. Mon Trice is giving you an introduction to 3 wonderful books. And stay tuned. We're going to have a special book giveaway. We just ordered additional copies for our nonprofit as well. So teachers, parents, stay tuned on our website. We'll do a book giveaway with a bundle of the books by Mon Trice. So here's our opportunity. Let's make sure we all are on the same page, that the 2 workshop series has really been about creativity, about the idea on how can we make history come alive in some meaningful ways, and not just during Black History Month, but really American history, of capturing and creating, as Mon had already introduced, those mirrors to see that representation, the windows for all students to be connected to history and culture in some meaningful ways. So what is this all about then? Why did we create this Youth Creates program? This is about the liberating power of words on a page, to be able to tell our stories with accuracy, to be able to build connections, and to be able to, sometimes we talk about hope as an object of something that we'll, achieve or receive, but hope as an action verb of hope for the future is really about telling our stories with accuracy, telling our stories that are representative, and telling our stories that celebrate the beauty of Mama Africa and celebrate the beauty of the African diaspora. So we want to thank you for tuning in to both of the workshops. You will find our announcements related to the release of the competition on our website at ppgjli.org, ppgjli.org. And this is only the beginning. Stay tuned. We'll have more words of wisdom, encouragement, and inspiration from none other than Mon Trice, accomplished author, accomplished educator, and accomplished freedom fighter. So we have been fortunate. So tune in, share, hit like, and inspire someone else to write that story that may be deep in their soul. Let's bring it. Let's share it with the world. So thank you. So we'll give you a virtual round of applause. We appreciate you, and we appreciate your creativity and that invitation you gave us all to inspire and create our own narratives. Thank you.
Thank you.